Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I thought that I should do a mid-month check-in video since my manner of reading has altered with the new year. Last year, towards the end of the year or the very beginning of this year, I decided that maybe I had been reading too many short books unnaturally so as to be able to produce a video sooner. I had been doing a kind of recent reads video where I would take 3 books and recap my reading. I was patterning myself on a certain sluggish reading booktuber, and something did not set well with me. And so with this year, I decided to throw all caution to the wind, throw all content to the wind, and just read what I wanted without a regard to making content. So I decided to embark first thing on War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. Now, this is not the edition that I'm reading, but it's convenient for holding up purposes. I find that I am in the midst of 4 books at one time. This is my main focus, but having this divided attention actually has been working quite well for me. So every day for 20 minutes, I read a little bit of Henry Adams' The History of the United States. Let me see if I can give you a better title page than that. So Volume 1 deals with the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, and Volume 2 deals with the presidency of Madison. A couple of years ago, possibly into last year, I read the diaries of John Quincy Adams, and he, not in so many words, but he essentially placed the blame for everything that is wrong with America's political system upon the shoulders of Thomas Jefferson. So I'm very curious to see what Henry Adams will have to say. I read this 20 minutes per day while I do some stretching, and I expect it's going to take me close to a year to get through the 2 volumes, unless here or there I decide to read extra of a day. But I'm not into it so far where that seems feasible for me right now. But in these first 2 weeks of the month, I have gotten to page 88. Let's see where it starts. Possibly it starts on 3, you would think. But one never knows. It starts on page 5. So I've gotten some 80 pages in. And it's not the most scintillating reading, perhaps. So far, Henry Adams is trying to give you a picture of the United States of America in the year 1800. So he's giving you an overview, what the literary scene is like. And he talks about different writers, different poets, and provides some quotes. He also discusses the political scene a little bit. I think he will be going into that more further on. He talks a little bit about the progress science has made since the time of Benjamin Franklin, which is not much. But so far, it's a very enjoyable read. So, on top of that, I am reading Disinherited by Dale Van Every, which is discussing the removal of Native Americans from their original habitats in the United States. Their homes on the east were gradually usurped, gradually eaten away at as shadows eat the moon. And they were successively either invited or forced to move west, always with the promise of no more further movements required. And Van Every goes into great detail of the history of the whole time and movement. I'm not sure how recently he will take his story up to, but I'm more than halfway at this point. I'm at page 138, and we've started with the initial incursions, the initial settler incursions, and we have gotten to the point of the Indian Removal Act, which I think was 1830, something like that. So a time period which will not be covered, alas, in Henry Adams. But we've gotten to the presidency of Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson, of course, defeated John Quincy Adams for the presidency and was a very popular American figure, albeit a divisive one. And it's something of a sad irony that he became such a popular figure for military victories, which he did not win of his own accord. He won those victories because he had the help of Native Americans. Otherwise, he was quite possibly something of a mediocre tactician, a mediocre general, but he had the help of Native Americans, and that kind of gave him the edge against his enemies in battle. I don't know the history of those battles. It's not something I've studied as yet, but perhaps one day. But one would have thought that such a figure would have then held a sympathy to the Native Americans and their plight. He did not, alas, and he made it sort of his aim to drive them out. And Van Every details all of that in great historic detail. All of, well, I can't say all of, but a lot of the documents of the time, the most pertinent ones, most salient ones, are reprinted in here. And so this book, which I heard about from booktuber Steve Donahue, I think he might have referred to it as a must-read work of history on the subject. This book is matching up to those claims 100%. I am very grateful to Steve for having recommended this book. Throughout the course of my life, there has been a large effort. I won't say concerted because I don't know how explicitly concerted it was. And I can't say to what extent I cooperated or collaborated in it or not. But there was a movement to keep facts about the American story out of sight, out of my sight. So when I went to grammar school, the lost cause mythology was what we learned about slavery. I, even in my family, was given to revere. This was not a major part of my upbringing, mind you, but given to revere Southern generals. We were taught, not just in the family, but all around in society, to look at these Southern generals such as Robert E. Lee as great men. And with the advent of the internet, much more information is much more readily accessible. And so I have come to learn that many of our national heroes, as they were, have feet much more of clay than we might have supposed in our delusions, our willful self-delusions, perhaps. So you look at a figure such as George Washington now, and you see his interactions with the persons whom he held as property, and you realize that he was not such a jovial and pleasant figure, albeit he had qualities that were less unsavory than some other man, perhaps. But so this is a tremendous read. I don't know if I will read or find a more recent treatment than this, but it's definitely an education and a bit devastating to read, but I am liking it very much. The book which I have made the least progress on is The Hittites by O.R. Gurney, which is a book I tried to read, I'm guessing in the 1990s when the latest edition, a Penguin edition, came out. Here's some maps. And here's a nice, I happen to have this in a Folio Society edition because when I was looking to buy it, I didn't think I could get the same copy that I had, which was a red colored cover on a Penguin edition. And this was available around the same price as I recall, or a little bit higher. And I thought, well, it's a beautiful volume which can be paired with my one Folio Society edition of a book by Moses Finley. And so I jumped for it. And I find reading a beautiful edition is a pleasure in its own right. Now, I have better sea legs now than I did the first time I attempted this. I was completely lost in all respects attempting this subject matter. And I'm a little bit better, if only for the reason that in 2022, I read 3 books about ancient Egypt. And so there's a little bit of correspondence. There are documents which studies of either would hold in common. And so I have reference points. And I also have a little bit better of a sense of the geography, having read some other works of history, such as Gibbon's Decline and Fall and Runciman's History of the Crusades. So there's a little bit more familiarity, but still, when you're looking at place names that existed for a while and then ceased to be or changed, it's still a bit of a confusion. And so there's an awful lot that I don't know. I wonder if I can read you a little bit of this. Oh, yeah, the area Cilicia, in other contexts, I recall coming across the gates of Cilicia, a very important location in more than one point of historical importance. I still can't really hold it in my mind. It's the kind of thing, it would be nice to take a a tour and be able to visit these locations and get a better sense of it. But without that, I'm sort of in a nebulous area. But for this type of subject matter, I don't think having crystal clarity is my aim. All I'm hoping for is a little bit more familiarity. So let me read you one paragraph here. The history of Cilicia during this period was entirely unknown until the discovery of the inscriptions of Karatepe. Pardon my pronunciation if I've got that wrong. And it is not yet certain how these should be interpreted. The author of the inscriptions, Azatiwatas, appears to be not himself a king, but the vassal or lieutenant of the king of Adana. In the Phoenician version, the latter is described not as king of Adana, as in the Hittite text, but as king of the Dinim, an ethnic term which has been vocalized and translated as the Danunians. The parallelism of the two versions apparently shows that the name of the Danunians is derived from that of the city Adana, but this does not preclude a connection with the Danunia who appear among the peoples of the sea in Egyptian inscriptions of the 12th century, and who may equally well have come from the ancient city of Adana, Hittite Atania. The suggested connection with the Homeric Danaoi, however, seems more problematical. There was then in the 8th century BC, this seems to be the most likely date for the inscriptions, a kingdom whose capital was Adana and which appears to have comprised most of the Cilician plain. The people of Adana, Hittite, Adanawanai, Phoenician, Dinim, would have been the survivors of a migration which took many of the Luwians of Kizuwatna across the Amanus into Syria at the time of Ramses III. Cilicia was known to the Assyrians from the time of Shalmaneser III onwards as Kue or Kawe, a name for which no explanation has yet been found. So, of that, about the only thing that resonates with me is, well, of course, I've known the name Ramses, although Ramses III, I don't know too much about him. And the peoples from the sea, that's very important when you go into the past, and there are different theories about who they might have been and what they might have done. This is not the latest scholarship on the topic, and as I say, I'm just hoping for a little bit more familiarity. Bit by bit, I try to figure out more what the rivers are, what the mountains are. I can't tell you how many times I've had to look up the Taurus and the anti-Taurus mountains, and that's how it goes. Back when I was reading this the first time, I would not have been able to look up any of that, so I was completely lost. Now the section which I'm on, I've only accomplished about 44 pages. I'm on page 46, so is giving a brief outline of history. So the book is divided into 8 parts. You've got outline of history, Hittite state and society, life and economy, law and institutions, warfare, language and races, religion, and then literature. Oh, there's a 9th, which is art. So, as I suppose it to be, this first section, the outline of history, can only be sketchy and will quite possibly be the most difficult section, I would guess. So I am progressing with all of my books. Let me do one of these pyramids. Oh dear. How does that work? And so far, because the topics are so different from one another, the divided attention does not seem to be hurting me. When I tire of one thing, I can put it down and pick up another. I try to leave off at good breaking points, so not in the middle of a sentence or a paragraph if I can, but where there's some kind of a subheading. And what I shall retain, I cannot tell you, but I wanted to check in and just report on how my experiment of doing multiple texts at one time is going. I did not really talk too much about Tolstoy. I'm actually reading it in the Maud translation. Everyman's has a 3-volume box, which is really quite lovely. I understand that there is an updated Maud translation around, but this, so far as I know, is not updated. I actually like updated translations of very reputable translations. But this is what is available to me. I wanted the smaller size for portability, and it's working out. And each volume has a lot of front matter as far as maps. There's good lists of who the characters are. And I'm not finding the maps something that I am using because I'm not really looking at the history of the book too much. I'm just letting myself be caught up in the sweep of Tolstoy's narrative. And with this book, I have just begun volume 2. I hope that's the one I have out here. The books are pretty evenly divided, so I have, in these 2 weeks, accomplished the first third. And as I say, I am enjoying it. And sometime in February or March, I expect to be reading Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. But other than that, I am hoping to plunge right into next some other big epic novel. That's where I want to put my focus for this year, even if I can't make a recent reads video every 2 weeks or so. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.